PVC meeting. As you guys have seen the agenda, there's two main topics. I think the first topic is pretty important based on the last meeting, and we'll go into that about the public safety, the contingency, and then we have the a solar PV discussion, and there's actually two parts to it. On the agenda, you see Jack Cogswell, but we also want to take the opportunity and talk a little bit about, and Hank will join us as well, and Michael Grice, in terms of not just the Jack Cogswell, but the Needham High School parking lot. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It's nothing that we need to vote on, nothing we need to take action on. It's more informative and to provide any level of feedback. But before we kick off those two items, let's start with the meeting minutes from the previous meeting. If we can get a proposal to approve the last meeting's minutes. Get a motion to approve.
I move to approve the meeting minutes.
And do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Erwin. Okay, any questions? Any issues? Hearing none. Okay,
I have a quick question, Stuart.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I'm assuming if these are all recorded, they are online for anyone that wants to look at them.
Correct.
Okay.
They are.
Are they posted between our meetings? In other words, will these meeting minutes be posted after they're approved? Catherine can answer that, I think.
You mean the video or the actual document?
Well, that's a good question. What is recorded? The video?
The record is what we're talking about here in the meeting, and that this video and audio is made available, and Steve Gentile sends it out to be posted, and it's accessible. The meeting minutes themselves, I believe, Catherine, stay within the building group's file system?
At the moment, I eventually do post them to the town website, but I haven't done that recently. But I do send it out to various parties. Like that 66 people get the minutes.
But the recorded meeting minutes, essentially the recorded meeting, is available how soon after we finish the meeting tonight, for example? Within
this week sometime. Within this week, it'll get posted.
So
Roger McDonald posts it.
Okay, so if I went online and I wanted to know what went on at the meeting, for example, I could do that within a week or so.
I think so, yes.
Okay, just a curiosity. Thank you.
Okay.
That's my question.
Any other questions? Raise the hand or hit the panel, the side panel. And I do not see any more or hear any more, so we'll go through the roll call as required by the video meeting. For the vote, Richard?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Erwin?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Stuart, the chair, aye. Okay. That's the administrative housekeeping item. And so the first topic is the public safety building. And I believe we'll break it into two pieces. I think, Steve, that you're going to ask Ken to give a quick update. And then the second part, which is really the bulk of the time, is to talk a bit about the contingency. And I'll preface that when we're ready to do that.
Who else is online?
Sorry?
Who else is on? Is the Chiefs?
Yep, Chief Slittler is on. I do not. Chief Dennis Condon is on as well. From a user group perspective, is there anybody else that's in the attendees that needs to be? Is Mike Retzky need to be coming into the panel? Steve Gentile?
I can bring him in.
Yep. Okay. I don't know if anybody else from the user group or any others are
Someone
joining
from
us.
Consigli?
I do not see Consigli.
No, Consigli, KBA, Steve and I discussed, we had no need to have them
Okay.
on.
Okay.
That's fine.
Matt
All right.
Toccio, maybe with IT, I think he was getting on, no?
I don't, he didn't say anything earlier, John.
Okay.
Really nothing that's going to affect him at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
I see he just popped on though.
Okay, there is, yep. Okay.
Okay, quick status update for headquarters. We're still shooting for the 17th of August to make the move. We're working through all the usual things you run up to at the end of the process, but we're working towards that. PD is going to move to Hillside on the 5th of August. And then we'll be moving fire into the new building and dispatch at the same time on the 17th. At Fire Station 2, we're working diligently with the soil removal, and I hope I can make this work. I want to show you a picture of, everybody see that out of my email?
Not yet.
I just did share screen.
Not yet. Hasn't come up yet.
All right, let's try this again.
It's coming on board.
Yeah, it's working now.
How about that?
Yep.
There we go. Okay. That is the slide box. And that's the first positioning. You can see what we're doing in terms of the excavation. The box is now, if you're looking at the picture, to the right of that, and they were prepping today to move it to the next position down to the right of that. We figure we've got 2, maybe 3 more positionings of this box. It's 16 by 16, about 8 feet deep. We have clean soil that at the bottom of where you are now, where you see that now. We're gonna have to bring it up about a foot and a half to get to bottom of footing. But this is the process that we're going through. It's more laborious and time consuming than we had originally figured. But nonetheless, they're getting into a little bit of a routine. Each time they move the box, it's a little bit quicker. So that's that. We're hoping that by the middle of next week, we've got the tainted soil out, and we're working on backfilling and mobilizing to start putting in foundations for the footings. So that kind of in a nutshell is where we are with that. Does anybody have any questions on progress, process, what have you?
Have you found anything worse than what we've already been informed about?
No, everything's been the same. We're actually moving tomorrow, as Ken was talking, to a 3rd location. That's more towards the front of what you see for existing foundation and footing that's been placed. So we have the geotech coming in early in the morning to show them exactly where the box is going to go. We'll stay there for a couple hours while we get it in place, and then start to drive those walls down. And we're going to work that front section as close as we can to the footings.
And right
If
now, they're planning on bringing in the groundwater drilling the 2nd week of August.
Have we tested that groundwater at all recently?
We have not.
Well,
We've not done-
aren't they
Go ahead.
testing what comes out of the influent and effluent?
We haven't had to do that yet because the tank is only about a 1/3 full right now. So until it gets a little more in it, where we think it's going to start to have to pump out, then they'll start to do some testing. Right now, we haven't had to run it.
So we don't know the magnitude of how contaminated that water is at this point in time, correct?
I've been up there to look at it, and I can tell you right now, there's no sheen on that water up in there. So from what I've seen so far, they pump very little water out of that hole. They're keeping up with it during the day because we don't have a lot of groundwater flow. Where we get most of the groundwater flow is from the previous hole we dug, because that soil is a different material than what was in there. It's not as silty and fine. So as long as we keep that down And we move quick enough. We don't need to do a lot of dewatering during the day. Actually, practically not at all. I think we dewatered for about an hour this morning because there was a little water at the bottom of the box before we started backfilling up inside it.
I have it's probably a dumb question. And that is, why wouldn't we try to test the water now, even though it's only a third full? Why not test it as soon as you can and see what you've got there?
They had tested it. That's why previously, but it didn't go through through the carbon filters and all that yet. So once that starts, we'll be doing that. So we're watching
I
everything.
see, Erwin.
Literally, we really haven't had to do very much dewatering at all. And they did test it at the beginning. He took samples out of the hole to see what it was, and then once he gets up in there, the LSP is going to do that long before we start to pump that tank down.
Erwin?
I have a comment and a question. My comment has to do with George's question. The standard procedure would be to put in some monitoring wells, which is a more acceptable way of gauging impacts from the groundwater. You can get a rough idea by just sampling out of the excavation, but you need a standard monitoring well to go in. My question, Ken, do you have any idea if they're planning 1 or 2 days of drilling, if they're planning 3 or 4 wells or 7 or 8 wells, just to get, it's an iterative process.
Three wells the second week of August.
Okay, so hopefully they won't require second and third iterations of monitoring wells.
We hope. There's going to be one that, if you're looking at that picture of the box, one sort of at the bottom of the page, and then 2 over to the right, which is sort of down gradient from the groundwater flow.
Thank you.
Any other
Those-
questions on the status?
Those will be in the access drive. I'm sorry, Stuart. Those will be in the access drive coming down the road, so they're out of the way of the excavation, because that hole's going to be open for a while, so we can't put them on that slope that you saw, but we'll put them right up top there, coming down that driveway, so we know what's happening on that line.
So Erwin, that, in answer to my question, it means we really aren't going to gain anything to sample now. We want to wait till we get the monitoring wells in and sample then, correct?
Yeah, yes, but what's good is what Mike said about there not being a sheen.
Yes.
That's a
That's
good
good.
positive indication, but hopefully it's not in a drinking water zone, so hopefully the level of contamination, and again, it seems like it's a pretty old spill, so hopefully the levels of contaminants will not require a lot of expensive groundwater remediation, but we need that first iteration of data.
So the LSP will sample a lot of those wells they put in. And if it's low enough, that's the end of the story, right?
Yeah, it depends what they turn out to be. DEP might require some seasonal monitoring just to make sure that we're getting, usually they want to see several rounds of sampling. I think if they would come out all non-detect, then probably not, but I don't want to get too far ahead of what to expect. But the first positive sign is what Mike said, that there's not a sheen. So we have to go from there and see what the first 3 wells tell us.
Okay.
Just so you know, I'm sorry, just so you know that that's running through filter bags and then into 2 carbon filter tanks. And then that's what'll happen when it all comes out. It'll all be filtered through that too. So,
But that's for the frac tank, right?
correct.
But the monitoring wells would be to make sure the groundwater is.
Right, for the insect.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you for answering that question, both of you.
Okay. Great. Any other questions regarding the status before we shift to the other topic? Okay. All right, so the next topic is really the core of what we need to work on tonight relative to public safety, and that is to figure out as a committee, as a working group, and certainly with Steve and Ken, is what number should we formally request of the town to support the completion of this project? Our last meeting, we were concerned about the contingency. As of the last meeting, we held a chairs meeting. That's with the Board of Selectmen, Select Board, excuse me, and the Finance Committee to review the situation. And we had I thought, a good discussion, but received a number of questions regarding change orders and a few other things. But what I thought I would do before we go into, I see you put the budget up, Ken, but just a little bit of history, and because I think it does play into some of these numbers, is that, we know at the beginning of this entire project, there was a lot of work, and George, you certainly were a lot closer with Steve and the working group as we went through the design. But, as a collaborative group, the users and the design team came up with the right design, and then a price was put against it, obviously, from a design and construction documents. But there was a lot of value engineering as we went through, and it came to a point where, if some of us remember, it was about 73.7 million in a number that we did. The Finance Committee requested that number come down to 70, and there was some, I'm going to call it budget engineering, and it appeared through just reviewing notes and trying to come up to speed on some of the various discussions that the contingencies were the areas where everybody pointed to there could be some flexibility. As most of us know, over the years with projects, we have put in certain percentages in relative contingency buckets. You got the design contingency, you've got the owner's contingency, and a few others. It turned out to get the number below 70, we dropped the design and pricing contingency by 400,000. We dropped the escalation contingency by 500,000 and the owner's contingency by 1.4. So you have basically 2.4 in reduction against the contingencies. I'm just bringing this up because it's not that we need to go back and rest on that. It's that we knew when we went into this project as a group, as a committee, that we felt pretty strongly that to deliver the building that had been designed and requested in a collaborative manner with the users, as well as our designers, that it would cost about, we needed a budget sitting in there. We went forward with a $70 million budget. And I think we've had some extraordinary events that have come and hit us up the side of the head. I'm using that liberally, so I apologize. But essentially, with the COVID situation and with the soil contamination issue, we've got $1 million, $1.5 million hit, I think, that's right against, and you can see the ACLs and everything else. And so really the question becomes, with what I believe is the correct projected budget in the contingency, Ken, is that what you've got up front? But when we went to the chairs committee the other week, we came up with a contingency of about 94, and now you're showing a $56,000
Right, we've had some
balance left.
There's been some CRs in the interim.
Fair enough. So
That
just to review, right? We had a contingency balance of what, we had about 4 million in contingency, 3.9.
Yep.
We've had to cover design omissions, design errors. We've had to cover just general change orders that are expected in a project. Going through the numbers of things on the table to figure out where we believe our best appreciation of the anticipated cost log right now is sitting now, it looks like 1.7, Ken, which leaves us about $56,000 in the contingency. The challenge I believe we have is twofold. And this is where we can get into the discussion to level set everybody and then move into, what is the right number that we need to go for. I've made a recommendation, but I believe it's important that this committee makes the recommendation now that we've got better numbers. But essentially we have COVID, which is in the ACL through the end of the project. We've estimated covers that, so that's in there. The piece that we do not have in this ACL is the risk of the tanks at the headquarters. And we know that there's three tanks, but 2 tanks that are removed and have some level of information to it. We may very well find out that there's no issues whatsoever, and that's the best case scenario. Or we may find that there's a situation similar to what we have in Fire Station 2, where we have to incur some additional costs against the project. And I would say, just based on this spreadsheet in front of us on the screen, we probably would not be able to cover any additional costs if we find a tank. The second part that we don't know, and that's just normal in the projects, is any other extraordinary events that come out of nowhere. We have zero room to cover anything. Consequently, if we took our conversation from last time around the contingency and the additional monies that we were going for, we looked to ask for COVID coverage. We asked to get the soil remediation costs, and that was about, I think, about 900,000 in rough numbers that we came up with. When we went to the chairs meeting, I pushed the number to 1.2 when it was asked because of the headquarters tank potentially. Now in further conversation, I think there's even a question of maybe putting 1.5 million on the table, because you've got to not only cover the headquarters, but you have still change orders that are coming down the pike potentially. And I'm going to throw a number out, and I'm going to ask you, Steve, to correct it along with Ken. But my understanding from a conversation with Steve is that Consigli and the project team have seen an approximate $75,000 to $80,000 change cadence per month. If you add that up through the end of the project, that's 1.5 million. So we have some numbers in here coming together that really put some significant risk. And we need to put the right number forward because we have one bite at the apple per se. And the risk is if we don't get it, I think we potentially are a project stoppage. But I do not want to say that that's absolute, but I think that's the risk. So I'm hoping I gave you a little bit of quick history and put it on the table, and maybe Steve and Ken, you could just, if I've made a mistake in the numbers, please clarify, or if you need to illuminate a little bit more of the numbers, do that. And then I'd like to open it up to the committee. But we need, our objective in this conversation as a working group and the committee is what number do we need to put forth to help us finish this project? This project needs to be finished. Steve and Ken?
Can I just, a couple of comments, Stu. That's a good wrap up, but I wanna throw in a couple of things that are somewhat important. When we went to the chairs, we were asking for 950, and that was a number that reflected remediating the soils in a way that has now been evidenced as being more cumbersome and more labor intensive than we had anticipated. So we don't really know whether that component, which I think was 450 of the 550 of the 950 is correct. So we're still have a soft number and won't really know what that cost is until we complete the activity, which was shown by the photograph as being more intensive than we were actually expecting, and knowing what the outcome of the monitoring wells are. So I just want to say we don't have a hard number on that 950, and it's likely to go up. So my expectation is that we're going to see a number resulting from COVID and soils remediation at a higher number than the 950, probably in that 1.2 million category that you're talking about.
Yep.
However, I do agree that the 75 to 80 burn rate on CRs is a realistic expectation, and that would yield over the next 18 months roughly 1.5 million. So I would suggest that we do not look at anything less than 1.5 million in terms of going back to town meeting, and then only after we've done some digging, which we're expecting to do once we occupy once we have fire occupying the new facility and we have moved the construction site, we anticipate going after some trenching in the vicinity of those tanks to give us some assurance that we do not run into a problem in that area. And if we did, then we would want to up that 1.5 million to some other number, because the feeling that I got out of the chair's meeting was we don't want to go to the town more than once.
Correct.
Um,
George?
I'd like to just go back to some comments that you made and how we got to the $70 million. And just a little bit of the history, which I think is important. And then I have some comments on the estimate that we're talking about. So I fought that battle for probably, I'm going to say, Steve Gentile remembers, and I think Steve, you also remember. That battle was fought over a period of a couple of months where we tried to get that number, them to agree with a number in the $73.5 million range. And it was like, that was the kiss of death. We can't go above 70. And it wasn't just the contingency for the project. It was also a couple of the contingencies in the contractors area. We cut him back more than we wanted to, and more than he wanted to. So there were cuts made in his contingencies, which he didn't really want to do, but agreed to do it for the sake of the project.
Is that the escalation contingency, George, I mentioned, or is that a
no.
different spot?
No, that's part of the contingency he had on his budget.
So above and
Steve-
beyond the escalation
Yeah.
piece.
Steve, you remember that, right?
Yeah, I think it largely came into design and pricing, that $450,000. He felt that he had not bought out his contract yet, and it turned
Right.
out
And
that
turns out it cost us more, I think, than it should have. But, and he went back to his senior management and they didn't want to cut it down, but they agreed to do it. So it was, we were kicking and screaming to do this, and it became a skinny rabbit only because of real strong pressure on us. And every time that's happened, it's come back to bite us. And I'm serious about that. So we cut back about $3.5 million. I think it was closer to 3.7 million that we cut out of that budget. And we didn't want to do that. We had no idea about COVID and we had no idea about contaminated soils. But in the past, we've been able to absorb some of those things. But anyway, that's a history of it that I think is really important for everybody in leadership to understand. We agreed to do this project for a price that we didn't think was the right price, but we agreed to do it. Okay, that's past history and water over the dam, et cetera. Coming back to the current situation, I think it's important if there was some way, and I don't know if there's any easy way to do this, Steve, you can comment on this as well. Is there a way to separate out the costs associated with the contaminated soils and the issue that really isn't and shouldn't have come out of our contingency? In other words, there's a cost on this project because someone in this town allowed contamination to take place, and who knows when it happened, how it happened, et cetera. And it really should not have been part of the contingency of this project. We've spent money on that now. We have money in the future. We don't know how much it's going to cost. I think there's got to be, if there's any way possible, to separate that out and allow it to float almost, rather than, and be honest with the town. Look, we had no idea that we were going to run into this. And it's not fair to
George,
ask us to put this out of in our contingency.
Yeah, George, to that point, I just want to stop you for 1 second and clarify, because this may play into the discussion, right? is that when we build our contingencies, most contingencies are supposed to cover anything. My sense is our contingencies are generally because of what we're finding now today. Design stuff and last minute changes versus extraordinary events coming from the side.
And if we didn't have COVID and we didn't have this problem with the contaminated soils, we would have enough money in our contingency to finish this project.
But what I'm saying, George, is that that's what a contingency is to cover extraordinary events. However, the way we
No,
do
it's
it
to
is
cover, it's to cover events that might occur in the project that we know occur on just about every project.
correct.
Contaminated soils don't occur on every project.
Right.
And COVID doesn't occur on every project.
I just wanted to clarify that point because I think it's important, is that our contingency is generally what our history has been on projects and what we know from a construction perspective, what we usually contend with. And that's why we go after the 8%, because we're probably going to choose 6% and 2% left over. Anyways, I don't want to split hairs, but I think it's important what our assumptions are and what we've always done over history.
But I believe, my opinion is our contingencies have never covered extraordinary events like the two we're talking about.
Yeah.
These are actually extraordinary events.
Well, it's fair to say that you know, if you go back to the high school many years ago, the steel prices really caught us off guard, right?
Well, there's a long story associated with that. It wasn't just steel prices. It was the events occurring at the time with the MSBA or the former SBA, and how the cost estimate was put together. Steel prices had something to do with it, and they got blamed for it in the long run. But
Okay.
but that's not really that's one of the issues.
Okay.
Back on the high school. But we never ran into a situation on other projects where we had extraordinary environmental conditions like we have now and COVID at the same time. Those two events, I think the town needs to recognize no one could have anticipated and included in their contingency.
Okay, so I know you got a hand up, Erwin, but can I just sort of summarize quickly, George, from you, and then go to Erwin? I'm gonna maybe speak for you. That's why you need to respond. Is that what I'm hearing is we should request the COVID and the soil contamination costs, which may get us to 1.2, maybe slightly more. But what I also think is that we have two other things that are kind of coming into our radar, which is the headquarter tank or a set of tanks problems. So are you suggesting you're comfortable with a 1.2, or are you looking for more, or are you waiting until more of this conversation?
You talking to me?
Yes.
I think it's hard to predict what that's going to be. Is there any way to be able to separate out the environmental costs that we've already discovered and that may be discovered until we dig the hole under the police station and find out if there's a problem there? I don't like the idea of something like the environmental conditions being held to a fixed number when we haven't even dug a hole in the ground yet.
Well, we can,
I'm concerned about that.
Stuart,
Yeah, go ahead, Ken, then I'll come to you, Erwin.
we can certainly categorize the Fire Station 2 stuff within the next week or two, because we'll be done with it, and we can put a number to that. As far as, what you might have at fire headquarters, if you want to protect yourself against that, then my recommendation would be whatever the number is for Fire Station 2, you throw that in there as a hedge against fire headquarters.
I don't want to do it.
But I think the other part that plays into this, Erwin, sorry, I am coming to you, Erwin, but
No, that's okay.
I don't
Go ahead.
want to lose sight of what Steve has shared with us, that if you take the $75,000 to $80,000 burn rate per month, that burn rate alone is $1.5 million to the end of this project. You got
Does that have-
56.
Does that include all the environmental stuff or not include all of that stuff?
No, that's just an average of the past 4 or 5 months. Then I'll just call them I don't want to say
It's the regular course of business, and I think when you take that,
stuff that's been coming
Right.
up on average.
So if you just take a simple set of numbers right now, if you've got 56 left and you only go for 1,200,000, you're short 300 if that 75 and 80 hold through the end of the project. Just think about that for a second, Erwin.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin here. First, about what George was saying about the extraordinary conditions. If there wasn't a project and someone across the street put in a monitoring well on their property and found contamination and traced it back to Fire Station 2, it'd be the responsibility of the town of Needham to address the contamination. I don't see much difference here. This is the town's responsibility. The town is responsible for the release at Fire Station 2. So I agree that anything related to contaminated soil, and I would include interruption of the project to deal with that. I don't know if that's been included in the 950K, and along with the COVID. So that's one point I wanted to make. The second point, are you saying that there are definitely underground storage tanks under where the existing police headquarters is right now?
No,
They-
they were tanks that were removed in that location that we have notation as being removed. We do not know if there was any leakage and if that leakage was not remediated at the time of removal.
Okay.
For one of the tanks we do, there is a report that says there was a minor spill, they cleaned it up, and that was the one that was out sort of behind the police side. But there were other tanks, possibly two, both of which have been removed. One, it appears, replaced the other, alongside of the fire station side, but the exact location is unknown.
Okay, so this is what is not always done, but should be done. Whenever you suspect there are underground tanks or underground tank issues, you do a preliminary investigation. So you put in, say, 3 monitoring wells around the areas, and you see if there's any indication of contamination in the groundwater. That at least can give us a heads up on what we might expect when the excavation of that area is going to take place. So I don't know if it's possible, if they're going to be drilling wells at Fire Station 2, if it makes sense to put an additional set of wells at police headquarters to try to get an indication enough in advance so we're not going blind into dealing with that next phase of the project.
And
So
Erwin,
that's-
I would agree with you. Just 2 points that may kind of sway the way you're thinking. One is the groundwater in that area is anywhere from 17 to 20 feet down, and we're not digging that deep. And what we're planning on doing was scratching, because the tank would not be all that deep. We're thinking of trenching, because we have to remove the foundation in the vicinity of where the tanks were suspected of being. So we were thinking of digging to see whether there was any odor or the look of the stuff, and maybe sending out some samples to see if there was something in that, 5 to 10 foot range from where the tanks were.
Okay, so if you can get like trenches or test pits in the vicinity of where the tanks had been, then that gives you some indication.
Right.
Even if the groundwater is 19 feet deep, you can still have a monitoring well drilled to that depth, and that would tell you if there was an extensive amount of leakage.
It's
My
something.
point is that there's some way, I don't know what the timing is from when we have to get our numbers together, but if there was some way to get some preliminary indication sooner rather than later, that might help firm up what we would be anticipating.
When could we trench around those areas where the tanks were?
After the move, so soon after the 17th of August.
You can't do it before that.
No,
No.
because they're using those bays, and we have to move out that side. So we'll be
Yeah.
in the way of the move.
let me just add perspective here is that you've got that move. We I believe have until September 1, according to the chair's meeting, for a number to go towards the warrant. And also, I don't know what the additional cost is of doing these pits or doing the digging ahead of time, which would be out of the sequence of what we've already budgeted for. Maybe it's not a big deal, but we can't lose sight of that. So we're going to need numbers sooner. And my goal is, you know, and as a committee, we can question that, but I would like to get to a number tonight and start giving heads up to the appropriate parties. I don't know if we can really cut it to close to September, but so be it. Go ahead, Erwin.
So correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we're talking about 1.5 million for the burn rate.
Yep.
And at least 1 or more million for contamination, subject to what we might be anticipated at police headquarters. Is that correct?
But remember that if you get the money back for the COVID and the current soils, let's just call it $1 million. You put $1 million back in the kitty, you're still short about 500. So maybe I put words in your mouth. You don't go for 2+ million. You're somewhere at that 1.5, 1.7, I think. Doesn't mean we can't ask for more, but.
But I don't understand. If we only ask for $1.5 million, we're going to use that for the burn rate, and all we got left is 56,000.
Correct.
Right.
But your burn rate is covering that burn we have. So extraordinary events, you're absolutely right, would be an extraordinary event.
I think you got to come up with your best number and then try to get some information from some trenching, and then you still, at least you would have an observation of what the soils look like. You might be able to get some pretty quick indication of whether there's going to be a big issue there. And that might give you enough time to modify it before September 1st. Just some thoughts.
Stuart?
Go ahead, Ken.
But remember, and Erwin, you'll know this, and even if we do a monitoring well, and even if we do the trenching, there's still no guarantee that when we open the whole thing up, we don't run into something.
Right, but what you're looking for is a big red flag that's a real serious issue, and maybe you could at least eliminate that.
Exactly.
Richard?
Essentially, that's what we found at the fire station too, is we looked, but we didn't find anything until we started digging. And then all of a sudden, in a place we didn't expect, we found something.
Yeah. Richard?
Actually, a comment and a question. On for the comment, I do agree that it might not be a bad idea to try to split out the unforeseen circumstances of COVID in particular. Strikes me as something that goes in that category. Because again, this might help the town in terms of building its case for whatever reimbursements might come down the pike from other levels of government. So I think that might not be a bad idea to, in terms of the tactical approach to it. I was wondering, Mr. Chairman, if during the chair's meeting, there was any discussion or any feedback from the finance department as to potential funding sources for a figure, whether it's 900, and we said 950 or higher. Was there any talk about that? What is the thinking of the town right now with respect to how they would accommodate this kind of expenditure? Just curious as to whether that was discussed at all.
Yeah, there's, to your question, there was not a part of the discussion that looked at the funding sources. The conversation and questions more got into what change orders have we already approved and why, and you know, what I would call stuff that is beyond. We're so beyond being able to value engineer any changes. There was a question about could we change, you know, the facilities and maybe do something a little bit less. And I think we you know, very, very quickly but subtly just kind of put that to the side. They asked for change order information. They asked for the budget. And then we'll come back together in a couple of weeks. I suspect that they're looking for sources, and Steve may have a better update than I do since that meeting. But no sources were discussed.
If anything, Stuart, as I recall, there was a movement among the select board to make sure we had sufficient funds to
Yes.
cover the cost of the project, and they were not stuck by coming back at just the cost for the soil removal and the COVID costs. So they wanted to make sure we could finish the project because.
And that was, I agree. And that was, it was one, they asked the question, is that all we need? You know, should we be going more? Because there was a part of go once, the town. And second of all, they believe strongly that this project must be finished. So that was a nice positive note for that. I think the concern is what is that number? And that's why we're in this conversation, is to try and see if we can peel the onion back a little bit and come with a better number that gives them the ability then to build up the discussion around funding sources and how we'll go.
I think the last thing we should do is give them a number. I think we need to give them a number for COVID and really, and I agree with Richard on this, we've got to identify what that cost is in the past and going forward. And the second thing is we have to identify all the costs associated with the cleanup of the Fire Station 2 and any potential future efforts to determine whether or not there are issues. And that should go in another bucket. And then if we need more other than that to take care of the rest of the contingency, that's another story. If they were talking about change orders, the change orders on this project, in my opinion, would have been covered by the contingency that we originally had. And that's why I think it's important to let the town know how much this is really costing us for the environmental issues and how much it's costing us for COVID. And I think, if anything, we need to put more money in those budgets to make sure that we have those. And I don't know, Steve, am I wrong in saying we could finish this project if it wasn't for the environmental and COVID? We could have finished this project with the contingency we had.
I don't think so, because we just showed the numbers, George, that if you replenish.
No. The current numbers are as a result of a lot of the stuff we're doing with COVID and with
No,
environmental.
take the 900,000, the COVID and the soil remediation today. Okay. If you add 900 back to the 956, just call it $1 million. You got $1 million in the contingency. If 75 to 80,000 burn rate is true to its calculation, we will go to 1.5 by the end of the project. You will be $500,000 short.
Steve, is that true?
That is correct. No, that analysis that Stuart just did is adequate. I mean, is apparent. It would have created a very tough going with regard to change orders going forward. We would have depleted the budget. I think we could get there. But
See, this is in my opinion, this is
going to be tight. And
this is the first I've heard that we couldn't finish the project with our existing contingency.
Well, that contingency has continued to drop. I think the numbers on the soils is a little higher than what we were projecting at the 950 level, and that's going to continue to bother us. But the way Stuart had analyzed it is accurate. I think it would have created a budget of roughly $1 million, a little bit north of $1 million. Could we have finished the project with a little bit north of $1 million? I think it's possible, but certainly if you ask me to say it's 100% possible, I would say no. There is some.
Okay, I need to make a comment, because I think that over the last few months we've been asking the question regarding contingency, and until the environmental issues came up, and the COVID issues became clear, we had discussions at just about every meeting that we had sufficient contingency to finish this project. And this is the first time hearing that taking those two out and all the effects of those, we no longer have sufficient contingency to finish the project. I'm surprised at that.
Well,
I really am. The
one of
burn
the
rate
big,
must be higher than we expected going forward.
It
No, that's-
is, George, and we thought, and as we've been saying all along, we've identified these items that were part and parcel to all the different phases of the project, and we've got that solved. We won't see that again. But over the last month and a half, we continue to have these niggling 5,000 here, 10,000 there. And when we analyze it and we back out those items like the window walls, things that are all three portions of the project, and you look at it and you just look at the last 3 or 4 months, these niggling little items, they're adding up to 75, 80,000 a month.
And there's no way to stop those.
well,
That's more than I anticipated, frankly.
there was,
That's why I'm surprised.
George, there was a big number. It's more than $100,000 that surfaced that we did not have in the ACL regarding general requirements. And we were hit with a change order right now that we're working on with of general requirements, which is not the soil-related general requirements, but general requirements due to the delays in getting the temporary up and running of that exceeds $100,000. It's in the order of $120,000. So
That's because we delayed getting that running.
that's right. And that wasn't being carried in the ACL.
Ah, so that's another, I think a $75,000 or $80,000 a month run rate is high at this stage of the project, based on all the things I've heard over the last 6 or 8 months. To me, it's high. It's higher than I think any of us anticipated as we looked at, we asked the question about contingency every single month. And each month we were encouraged to believe that the contingency was able to handle it, with the exception of the 2 extraordinary items we were talking about. And now we're saying we couldn't have handled it. And we now have $75,000 or $80,000 a month. Now, I understand if that's what it is, but I'd like to see if there's any way that we can cut back on that and not make it 75 or 80, but something less than that.
It's possible that we can do that. But at this point, if you're arguing or you're determining what is an appropriate number going forward, I would not bank everything against our ability to knock that $80,000 per month down to 60 or.
Yeah, and I may just add a commentary there, Steve and George, into the committee, is that I think we will be asked to do a level of inspection and a level of number crunching to justify some of the numbers. I think the hard part tonight is that it wouldn't be in our best interest to try and drive down our assumption on the burn that we have to force the project to 45. And the reason being is we're trying to go to a number that would protect us. Our goal is to try and bring this project in under. However, if we take our conversation and move to what is that lowest number that we really could go for, we may shortchange ourselves for the future. So I might just encourage us to simply say, if a 75 to 80 is the burn rate right now, then let's not nitpick it. We have to nitpick it as a committee, or I should say Ken and Steve will have to come back with a much more detailed analysis of these pieces to this committee, as well as probably to the chair. So when we go forward with some number, they have justification. But again, just to clarify, I think it's important. What is that number that we think we're dealing with at this stage?
And then we need to have 3 pieces. We have the COVID piece, we have to have the environmental piece, and we have to have, whoops, we ran out of contingency piece.
Correct. And right now, what I'm hearing is that, you know, $1.5 million is, you know, assumed because the contingencies consumed the soils and the COVID right now. And we've got it in the ACL, assuming no other major COVID doubles or the soil remediation doubles at Fire Station 2. We have a burn rate of 75-80. The only thing we don't have covered is the gotcha out of the headquarters. That's the only thing. So I think $1.5 million is kind of where we're starting at this stage of the game. The question is, and I'd like the other committee members to add commentary to it, but I think we have to put something in for the headquarters and just, you know, that's just it's great if we don't spend it. It goes back to the town. That's what our goal is. But if we go to the bite of the apple and we get it, I don't know what we do if we really hit into a problem with headquarters. Go ahead, Erwin.
Two things. So if you want to be conservative about the unknowns regarding those former tanks, then you probably have to ask for 2 million. You'd have $500,000 to cover probably maybe a worst case situation at police headquarters. And then my related question to that, how do we justify that? How do we justify the 2 million? We can justify the COVID and the soil, which seems to be about $1 million. And I wanted to know if that includes project delay costs associated with the soil contamination issue.
It does.
It does. Okay, so we can justify that, but how do we justify $1.5 million or 2 million?
And I think what we're going to have to do is go through an analysis. The project team is going to have to go through some real clarity on what these numbers are and why we're spending. I mean, to me, when we went back 2 months ago, I think it was, when we asked for the spend on the contingency to be broken into buckets, design issue, normal change order, user requests, we need that level of insight. For where we are right now in this conversation, you know, I think we've got to start gelling a number, and I think that you know, I don't want to suggest that we are going out to the town as a committee. This is for this committee. This is an open forum meeting. I understand that. I'm going to leave it. I think we should leave it to the town to figure out where those sources are. Maybe they use some funds that are already there somewhere. That's up to them. But from our standpoint, what do these guys need to finish? And I guess Steve and Ken, maybe I turn to you at this point, the conversation, and just ask again, what do you think you need at this stage to finish based on the numbers that you know today?
Well, I think I thought we answered that. I thought we're looking, excuse me a sec.
I just want to just bring it back to that. Once Steve gets back, just want to make sure that
when Steve gets back, I'd like to emphasize that I think we should give them 3 buckets and make it clear what those 3 buckets are.
Yep.
What I don't want to do is I don't want to shortchange the police department, for example. They're kind of second or third in the list here of building projects. As time goes on, we haven't even started that project, and I want to make sure that we don't come along and all of a sudden we do a great job doing everything we had to do for the 2 fire stations, and then because we're squeezing the police department, we don't end up with the things we think are necessary there.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that we have enough money to finish the project the way we plan to design the project.
Yeah. Steve? Just to recap, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. First of all, well, to answer the question about police, we have been evaluating requested changes on the police side ongoingly and have made determinations. So I don't think there's a short we're shortchanging the police. And the kind of changes we see in the 75 to 80 are mostly changes that occur within the design omissions or design conflicts, errors and omissions that take place in a contract, you know, in a project of this magnitude. I do want to address George's concern, George. You know, when we were at 1.3, which was about a month ago, I did say that we think we had enough contingency, and I did think we did. At that time, there were two major hits that occurred, actually three issues. One was the lack of carrying the ACL with the general requirements for the delay of the temporary. But there was this change with regard to a retaining wall that was necessary, which we hadn't anticipated, which was around $50,000. And there's another $50,000 change to the breathing apparatus as a result of a design deficiency. And that's an issue that I think we as a committee also need to discuss, whether or not we take that kind of a change and push it back onto the architect, or we assume the responsibility for the cost because we assume the design, that we hired the designer and we take on that responsibility. I'm not clear as to which way we should be moving on that. I have thrown out the fact that we probably should be pushing back at the architect on that particular issue. And I need guidance from the committee as to whether or not they feel that's appropriate. But
I think that's a separate issue at this point, Steve. I agree with you. I'd like to see at some point that number updated regarding how much changes have cost us because of errors and omissions on the project. I personally think they're higher than usual. That's my opinion, but I don't think we should delay what we're doing here. I think we should put the money request into three buckets. One, design changes. Two, contamination caused by the situation, both present and future, if we have an estimate for that. And three, the COVID-19.
Okay, just to clarify, George, George, I was going to rephrase that, or I'm going to play it back because it's a little different than you said earlier. Soil, COVID, and contingency. So what you're saying now is the contingency is represented by the design error omissions.
Well, no, it's represented by a whole bunch of things. It's not just design error and omissions. That's a part of it. I mean, the reality is that it's costing us more on this project for a lot of reasons. And it's not just errors and omissions, but I think we ought to look at that as a separate issue and not let it cloud the going back to the town at this point in time. We've always owned that in the past, although in some projects we've fought to get some of it back when we found that we felt that they were accountable for it. But I think there's not a lot to be gained at this point in doing that. And I think we need to put whatever number is in there, but have it in three buckets so it's clear. And if we can identify major items like Steve's referring to that are in that contingency bucket that were unanticipated, then those should be identified. That 100,000 should be identified. The same with the 250,000 numbers. And if there are other major items like that, I think they should be identified.
Well, another major item was $100,000 was taken out of our contingency to deal with contamination at the the Chestnut properties that we had. So
you know you can put all those things together. Put that into the contamination soil stuff. Put it all together in there. But I think three buckets are necessary to convince people in the town that this is why we need this money. It isn't just because we screwed up, and it isn't just because we had contingency taken away initially. These are the three reasons why. and make it clear to them for all three of those. I think that makes sense. As Irwin has said on a number of occasions, the town owns the environmental stuff, like it or not. It's going to be spent on this project, but the town owns that.
I think George, I think we've all agree. I think that there is a fair and reasonable argument the town should replenish contingency for that contamination. I think that's it. I think the challenge we have is there's actually more money above and beyond. I think the COVID is explainable. And I think that there's, the town may try and go for a different source to replenish that, but that's their desire, that's their choice at this point, but we would ask for it. So I think the soil and the COVID are very reasonable asks. I got a sense from the chair's meeting that was a reasonable thing to contend with. The concern I have, and I think the concern we all should have, is right now, that's not where it's going to stop. We actually need more. And that's where that contingency third bucket comes in. And I think that, I think it's $500,000 sitting there that's, if we are on our burn rate, we have to go after at least $500,000 just to protect what we know today, not to mention the headquarter tanks. So I think that—
Then we got to go after it.
Yes, there's at this point in the conversation, we're late into the other topic, but this is very important. So let me see if I can make an attempt here to say that one, we need to work a number fairly quickly, because we are now getting into the first week of August, and the town chairs are going to need, the finance committee are going to need some level of interaction to figure stuff out. And I believe it's September 1 is where the warrant sort of draws the line and publishes, I believe. So I would ask this committee is that we need to come up with either now or no later than the next meeting, I believe, a number that we project as needed for this project. We are responsible for this project collectively. It is our responsibility to provide them guidance on a number. So George, earlier you said, I don't want to give a number. I think we have to give a number. If what you're saying is we should give a range, I think we can do that, but I believe we have to give them what to react to.
I understand that. But if you don't know the results, and it sounds to me like we're going to know a little bit more about headquarters, but before September 1. This is what I think we ought to do. I think we ought to come up with the three estimates, do the best we can with those three, get that information to us as soon as possible, but before the next meeting. And let's vote on it at that next meeting. And maybe at that point in time, we will have some information from, we'll have more information from Fire Station 2, and we'll have some information from the headquarters tanks area.
Well, we won't have headquarters because the police don't move out till the 17th. So
No, they
we're
move
going to
out
have a
the
meeting
5th.
prior to that.
They move out the 5th.
Yeah,
No.
but we can't dig till fire moves out on the 17th.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then we put in an estimate for that.
Right.
But we
Right.
clearly identify what that estimate is, so that if we need to come back in the future, we have something to stand on. We don't know. It's hard to estimate an unknown.
Fair enough, but I believe we have to make that. I mean, look, we had unknowns when we started the project, and we put a contingency because our history and our assumptives had to be there. I think we're in the same position, and we just got to put a level of our best knowledge forth.
Identify what it is and say, this is what the risk is at this point.
Right. So any other comments from, Richard, Gene, user group, Dennis or John or anybody else relative to this? Because I think what I'm hearing now is we'll go after the three buckets. I would ask Steve and Ken to basically take the numbers, boil them down, categorize them, and get into a level of refinement that allows us. But from committee members, Richard, Gene.
I think that's a sound approach. I would agree with that.
Okay. Gene,
Agree.
John or Dennis, any comment from you guys?
I agree with the approach. I do think that I mean, there are things that might come up that we're not aware of, but we've gone through a lot of it in terms of any change requests. We've gone over the plans quite a bit, so there might be some little things with design or something of that nature, but I don't see anything from us that's going to be a big issue.
So no requirements on your side that might be missing that are absolutely required in today's day. It's already covered.
Yeah, as far as, because we've gone over it several times, and we actually went back over it with Consigli and KBA with Keith on a couple things. So it's something we'll talk about tomorrow, probably at the meeting as well, but we've gone over it quite a bit.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Before you, Erwin, just Dennis.
Yeah, I think the approach is good. I think it's sound. I do feel there's been a tremendous amount of errors and omissions on our side. Things were in some drawings, but not on all drawings, and things that we requested and so forth. So I think that's been difficult. The other thing, Ken, we might be able to empty out those back rooms or get whatever we're taking out of them and move them up front before the move. So if that helps, we might be able to get things squared away so that you could get in there after the 10th. I don't know if that makes any real difference.
It would help. I just need to talk to the mover, because remember we talked about bringing a lot of the stuff even from the main part of the building
Right.
outside. So let me see what might work with him. I'll have a conversation offline with Steve Gentile tomorrow. And
Yeah,
see
if they want to walk through again, we can arrange that.
Yeah, because otherwise it's got to come out the front and back in the front,
Right.
apparatus bay to apparatus bay, and that's a little cumbersome. But if Wakefield's willing to do that, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Erwin?
I just need some clarification on exactly what we're going to be asking for. And are we supposed to come up with a number tonight, or are these
No.
buckets going to be worked upon and then we're going to decide in a couple of weeks?
Here's my recommendation. My recommendation is that Steve and Ken go back and create a simple table. But hard work will be done, I know. But 3 buckets. One is the soil. So the costs that we should seek the town to recover in the contingency for the remediation of Fire Station 2. Second bucket is the COVID costs, which we know, which are the numbers that have been expended, the numbers that we anticipate to expend through the end of the project, as well as carrying costs and costs associated with COVID. The third bucket is a additional contingency to cover, and I believe that this is something we'll have to discuss, and we can take it off of this meeting, and I can meet with Steve and Ken tomorrow. But I would just suggest that we clarify within that contingency bucket the cost of the design errors, the cost of the design omissions, and we also have, not necessarily in the number, but we know what that number is, which is the user requests changes. I believe those are the 3 types of contingencies: designer omissions, design errors, and then user requirements. I believe the 3 pieces other than what we've talked about. So again, a simple table with 3 numbers, and we'd have detailed back up to that. And I think tonight, what I would just ask for is that, do we think a range of 1.2 is where we think we are? And that we will then meet at the next meeting and clarify that number down to a request.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Richard.
I wanted to just clarify. So the table, as I understand it, would be both retrospective, looking at how we got to where we are, plus prospective, looking at where we think we're headed and what we will need from the town in order to make ourselves whole and complete the project. So I want to make sure that both elements are going to be included in the table.
Yes, the number we need to go to the town with is what we need to finish the project with. But remember, it's going to be derivative, right? It's money that we've already expended, money we anticipate to expend, and those 2 together in a category of soil, COVID, and contingency.
Where are the general requirements going? Just so we're clear on that.
I think the general requirements need to go in the respective bucket. There's general requirements because of COVID, and there's general requirements because of the soil remediation. If it's too blurry, maybe I'll look to Steve and Ken outside of this to do that, Mike. But I think the reality is those two events created general conditions. And if it's one number and easier, so be it. Erwin, I'm
agree with
sorry,
that.
you were trying to finish up.
Yeah, I don't want to belay this any further, but I'm still having a hard time with the justification piece. I know we can justify the COVID. I know we can justify Fire Station 2 soil. And I think we could come up with an estimate of prospectively what we might find at police headquarters. So is that essentially the number we're looking for? Accounting for the contingency, we can do the accounting on where the expenses have been and where they might be headed. But where's the justification to ask for more contingency for errors and omissions and change orders and those kind of things?
So I
That's
think
where
we
I'm-
have to build, that's a great question. I think that's part of what we have to do between now and the next meeting is clarify that justification. The project team needs to come up with those numbers and justify why we're estimating that out. But I think, Erwin, right now, the way I see it is that we don't have a clear justification, but on the same token, I don't think that's criteria to eliminate the ask just yet. Because I think we would be tying our hands behind our back. We have a pretty good gut feel, and I think it's a legitimate brain gut feel because of the number of projects we've managed and what our experts are telling us. And I know that Steve and Ken have worked a little bit with Consigli the last few days to sort of get near that 75, 85 and say what's really going on. I think there's been a lot of discussion around there. So I'd have to believe more of the experts, but we owe the justification by the next meeting, or certainly a very good justification. And then I know we will be forced to really justify it when we go in front of the town. Fair?
Can we target it before the next meeting so that we can at least have a few days to digest it before we meet? I think it would be really important to do that.
Steve, is that okay?
Well, no, it isn't, because we really will not have the soil costs on Fire Station 2 in our pocket until at the earliest.
I heard by the end of this week, we would have a good handle. Now I'm concerned.
No, the end of next week.
End of next week.
The end of next week, we hope to have the soil, all the contaminated soil out, and then we can start to develop what, a closer number to what our costs are. It won't be exact even at that point, but I can at least at that point tell you whether the 217 that we're currently carrying is closer or is it 317. But it'll be until the end of next week because we're not expecting the soils to be completely removed until Tuesday or Wednesday of next week.
But in putting numbers together, we can put the numbers we know now for the soil, and we can put a plug in for what we think it's going to be.
We can make assumptions as to what it might be. Don't forget, we have variables with regard to groundwater, vapor barrier, things of that sort. We're going to have to throw in numbers or plug numbers for those uncertain items.
I think I agree with that. However, it's really difficult for us. You guys have been living with this every day. And I think it's very difficult for us to come to a meeting and try to digest all of this. If we had 2 or 3 days at least to at least look at the numbers and look at the justification, I think the discussion would be a much better one.
Okay,
Steve, what's the likelihood of the team being able to pull something together?
we're talking about
2 days ahead of time.
Well, when you say 2 days ahead of time, George, I usually send out the agendas on Friday and the meetings are Monday. Does that give you enough time?
If everything is there, yes.
Then that's what I'll do. I'll send it out with the agenda for the meeting in, I guess, is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? When's the
2
next
weeks.
meeting? Next meeting's the
Catherine,
10th.
is that correct? 2 weeks?
Next
The
meeting,
next meeting is on August 10th.
Yep, 2 weeks.
If you have it sooner than that, I wouldn't wait for the agenda.
I mean, in all honesty, this committee, Steve, Ken, and the working group, we're in a situation where I'm not sure how much leeway we have. If we're trying to get the funding that's needed for you to complete the project, we take a risk if we don't, I believe, target. If we do not get it done now, I think we're at risk of putting a lot of challenges on the team until the next town meeting in May.
I completely agree with that.
So I apologize, but I think we really have to put the afterburners on and figure this out. And I think you got the numbers.
Okay. I just want to make it clear that we have been stating that we have sufficient contingency to get the project done. There have been a couple of surprises, i.e. the general conditions issue, that have come aboard. But we have one bite at the apple. It's clear that we made a strategic error by dropping the contingency back 2 years ago by $1.5 million. That was a strategic error.
Okay.
I don't think anybody agrees. So do we want to continue making that?
No one's asking for that, Steve. I think we need to have a number that we can discuss. And as soon as we get a chance to do that, I think we ought to ask for anything we think is appropriate at this point so we can finish the project without shortchanging any aspects of the design.
Okay, but that comes back to play out. How do we explain that to the town?
Yeah, well, obviously we've got to figure out how to do that. We've been able to do that before. We just have to do it. That's
Yeah,
all.
I think we'll that explanation, I think we'll get there. But I think most immediately, it's pretty clear to me what we have. We have an extraordinary event, 2 of them, that are coming to about $1 million. So I think we've got clarity on what that is.
That is
The
correct.
part that's not as clear is the design omissions and design errors that are creating a budget crunch. And because we're down into the bowels of building the building now, we can't engineer out stuff. We are
Right.
what we are and what the project is showing us. The project shows us what it's doing right now. The only part that's really at risk is your qualified assumptions around the estimate to go forward. So if the 7580 is an estimate, it's your qualified and your experience that says, look, I think we've got to get that there for us to manage the rest of the project. Otherwise, as we know today, we're going to do X. I think the justification's on the table.
Yeah.
The real justification for, FinCom and all those people are probably going to need more than that, which we can build. I think the justification is right on the table in front of us, personally. I don't know if you people disagree, but I don't want to keep swaying back and forth into that. We've been playing with these numbers so long. I mean, I'm a simpleton. I'm not as qualified as you guys on some of the project stuff. I can take those numbers right there. I mean, I've already said.
You've identified the numbers.
Right. But the piece that I think we have left to go is what is a qualified assumption, or I should say, what is a engineer's assumption on an unknown about the tanks at headquarters, because that's the only other event that we know other than extraordinary that is completely out of our realm of possibility. And the finish up of that Fire Station 2. I mean, I can't believe we can't look at Fire Station 2 right now and say, based on you know, here's where I think we can be. Worst case scenario, it's going to be sky's the limit.
Yeah, so it's going to come down, Stuart, to explaining why we needed more contingency than what we had originally assumed.
And right now that's $1 million because it's been spent.
Well, it's another $500,000.
Well, now today, it is now showing that there's an additional $500,000 because of our change order burn, which gets us back to the original contingency we asked for in the project in the first place, based on our experience. So I think there's a level of discussion and potential argument how everybody wants to organize that defense. I think is post our number right now. So, I mean, are we saying $1.5 million is the number we're floating around? You think it's going to be more?
No, I think $1.5 million would do it were we to get some feedback on this exploratory work outside of
Headquarters.
Station. Yeah.
Okay, so at this stage, I'd like to draw a close to this discussion, unless people have more questions, is that we need to get that table. We need to get those numbers. We need to do it before next meeting, so people can review that, and we should vote as a committee of what we are formally asking. I think at the same time, it makes sense for probably Steve to socialize a little bit with Dave Davidson, some of the numbers we're getting near, and probably myself to go to Mo from a chair's perspective and just share what we're doing. I think we need to be somewhat transparent of where we are, because I think we're crunched by that time of the September 1 warrant, I think. So if anybody has any objection, please voice it.
Stuart, just on that September 1 date, we have to put in the warrant at September 1. The number can be changed up to the actual day of the warrant, but.
Okay. All right, so we are okay with till next meeting, really. We do have a little bit of leeway, I guess. But I'll talk to Mo and ask him from a standpoint of the select board, you know, where we are and if there's any additional requests. Go ahead, Erwin.
Yes, I'm just thinking from an LSP perspective, there's another way to get at the underground tank question, and that would be a geoprobe, where I don't know what the access is, Ken, or whether we're talking about the building is over the footprint of where the tanks were, but you can have a day's worth of geoprobe into the soil, and you can just use a screening device, a meter, and just get a sense of whether you really have heavily contaminated soils. That's something you can do in a day.
What's
another.
What's the equipment, Erwin?
It's a device that's smaller than a drill rig that can fit inside buildings, and basically pounds tubes into the ground and then pulls out soil. And then you could open up the split spoons and screen the soil with a PID and see if there's any elevated vapors. That's something that Phil would know about.
Yeah,
We use those over on Rosemary when we were doing the footing areas for the pool.
So that's another option in a
Or
building.
geoprobe.
That's another option that can get you results in like a day.
That's something we may be able to do sooner rather than later, because you're not taking up a lot of area. It's not like you're trenching and digging test pits. You could isolate an area and just move along.
Yeah, this is just putting small holes in the.
I'll talk to Tara about that tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. All right. With that, I appreciate everybody's time. I know it's not an easy situation, but we need to get through this. It's important for the project and to enable Steve and the team to and the user group to get what's been designed. We do have some voting items to close out the public safety topic, the agenda item. So I'm going to ask if we can vote on, there's a total of 6 items. I'm going to probably group some of them together. Catherine, I have what's in front of me. I've got, as I said, 6 invoices, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I'm going to put together 2 right now. An invoice from Intrasystem. I'm going to put forth 2 invoices together. Intrasystems for data servers and switches for $1,350. An invoice for Milton Cat, July 2020 generator rental fee for $26.12.50. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, George. And any questions? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll come to the vote. Roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Gene,
Aye.
Stewart's aye. Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schittler.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. The next 2 invoices I'm putting forth for approval are from the town of Needham Police Detail. One for $556.25, and the second invoice for $590. They're both for July 8th and 9th on Chestnut Street. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll go through the roll call for a vote. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Gene,
Aye.
Stewart, chair is aye. Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Switzler.
Aye.
Great. Final 2 invoices putting forth for a vote of approval to pay is Granger undercarriage washer for $1,949.69. Second invoice for $3,899.38. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Irwin. Any questions? I just have one.
Those come out of FF&E budget?
They come out of the owner's equipment line item.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Any more questions? Hearing none, seeing none. Okay, roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Gene,
Aye.
Stewart, chair, aye. Chief Condon,
Aye.
Chief Schlittler.
Aye.
Thank you. And that's all for public safety, correct, Catherine?
Correct.
Okay, that wraps it up for the public safety. Thank you. And we're going to switch gears now to,
Thank you, everyone.
Stay
Thank
cool,
you.
everybody.
thank you.
You too.
Okay, we're going to go to the solar discussion. There's 2 parts to it. Can you let Hank in and Michael Grice, please? And I think Rick Merson too. Okay. All right. There's 2 parts to this, the Jack Cogswell building and then the Needham High School topic. So Hank, do you want to cover the Jack Cogswell? Is that correct?
Steve Gentile will do that.
Steve, sorry, Steve, do you want to cover that? And then I'll go to the high school one.
Okay. I was going to share something, but I don't know if I can find it.
Do you want, is it part of your agenda you sent out?
Yeah, I should be able to do it here. Let me just let me try to pull it up now.
While he's working on that, I'm going to quickly do an audible, and we got 2 invoices for the Jack Cogswell building. Can we just go to a quick vote on those? Any objection? Okay, so there's 2 invoices. Catherine, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to put forth 2 invoices. One is for the Hydrograss Technology, the knotweed treatment invoice for $1,000. And the second invoice is CWG weather station laptop for $401.14. I put forth those 2 invoices for payment. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, George. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to a vote. We'll do the roll call. Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin,
Aye.
Gene,
Aye.
Chair Stewart, aye, and I believe Rick Merson, you're the user group, correct?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. That covers that set invoice. All right, go ahead. Back to you, Steve.
Is my screen sharing right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'm using this as a basic diagram for myself to walk myself through it. Basically, we're at a point where we went through a design phase for the solar array at Jack Cogswell building. And we had scheduled it to be, there's basically 4 pieces to this process moving forward. You'd go to the utility connection, you'd pursue net metering, smart program, or bidding. We're at the first piece would be applying, the next step in the process would be applying for the utility connection. And that's where we are now. We have the drawings, we have a bid set, we have the single line diagram, a site plan, and we're ready to make the application. The application will be $648 based on the rate of kilowatts. And so we're ready to go with that. But there were questions about next steps for the PVC, how to proceed with this. We met some resistance with FinCom about the overall piece of this. Some of the other issues are we need town meeting approval. And the question would that be in the fall or the spring? And then we also are kind of hung up in land court. And the reason that's significant is because it affects the single parcel rule. And so that would have to be cleared up, and that would be needed to get net metering, which is the more preferable rate. So I think we're just at a point where we could open it up for discussion. What are the concerns to move forward with solar? Obviously, cost is one of the concerns, but if the committee wanted to move forward, I would submit this application. I'd ask for $648 and move forward. But I'm sensing some concerns about how to proceed. So I'd like to get feedback on that piece.
My concern was, I thought we had already discussed that we would continue with this, but not expend funds to purchase or install solar for the building, but we would keep going as long as it didn't cost us more than, nominal fees such as a $640 fee. I see no reason why we shouldn't keep going on this. And then when we get to the point where we're looking for money for the real project, then we need to go back to the town. Isn't that your understanding, Steve?
That's how I thought we left it, but this is a check-in. I'm about to submit the application and just wanted to get a double check on that.
I think we ought to submit it.
I would agree for a nominal fee to proceed, but I think the part that is challenging is the fact that Dave Davidson has raised the concern that we may be challenged with solar, the amount of generation that panel could do, or a set of panels could do on that building, would far exceed the usage that that building would require, and they may jeopardize the status. It almost looks like we're a for-profit than a non-profit, and that the consideration of the town as a whole is not considered. It's always physically one spot. And from that discussion last time that we had it, I think we were concerned with going forward at all beyond just the permitting side. And I think with the fiscal situation that's out there and the amount of cost that would need to be expended to put those panels up there is not something that people have appetite for. From the chair's meeting and the FinCom discussion as well. So even if you go for permitting, I'm not sure if we would get beyond the gates that have already been put up.
There's another aspect as well. Were we to permit it, the permit would only be active for a period of time. And if we don't act on that permit, then we basically have recycled the entire project, would have to recycle the entire project again.
What is that period of time?
Steve, do you recall?
I thought we had, well, first of all, it's going to take Eversource some time to go through. I think they have 3 months to review the application. Then
Right.
if they deem that it's necessary to do a more detailed study, That could take another 3 to 6 months. And then once we get that approval, I think it's good for a year. And that year could be extended to another half year.
I thought that was what we were planning to do, was to continue this process until we realize we've got to, fish or cut bait. And that would be a while. And I think we ought to do that. As long as it's not costing us a lot of money.
Yeah.
Let's not give up at this point.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Then if people are in agreement, then I will proceed with the utility connection and get Eversource going in that process. And then after that, I would proceed to get involved with the SMART program and pursue those applications. And that would need another fee on the credit card. But I didn't want to go forward spending money without the consent of the.
Yeah, let's review the money, but I think Erwin, you have a question first.
Yeah, I thought there was an issue about the net metering, about whether we could, in fact, put back into the grid the excess capacity that we would be generating at Jack Cogswell building, because we all recognize the demands are much less than what the panels would provide. Wasn't there still a question about whether we could contribute that excess energy back into the grid so that there would be a benefit to the.
We can do that, and we would have to work on those arrangements such that the credits or the money would go back to a town such as the school or something. But I don't think that's an obstacle at this point. I think there were questions raised, but I don't think it's an obstacle for us at this to move forward.
Without an application, though, you're not going to know the answers to those questions. Aren't those questions going to be answered?
That Steve, can you just tell us what costs you're looking for from us to okay to move forward?
Well, it's 648 for the utility application, 600. And Hank, do you have an idea of what the SMART application would be, based on your experience?
It would easily be an equivalent amount, probably up to $1,000. So it's relatively small change in the big picture.
Yeah, and I guess the question, there's an advantage to pushing this forward. We get better rates the sooner we do this. The more it gets dragged out, we go lower on the rate chart. So that's the next question on the list. Should I proceed as quickly as possible to get into the SMART program, or do I risk moving forward without town meeting approval to a situation that doesn't have support?
If I may phrase it to the committee, what I'm hearing is that we need to spend about $1,700 to go to these programs. We need to move fast to get the advantageous part of the program. And unless we do that, we can't put forth a more formal review and decision on whether we're impacted because of demand less than what's generated or more is generated than is used. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And would the committee support that of spending the $1,700?
Yeah, I'd round it up to 2,000.
Well, we don't know what it is until we see later. We know 684 is necessary, and that other number, it's going to be probably 1,000.
So we're authorizing 2,000 of the contingency from Jack Cogswell to be put forth towards this effort. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, for the time being,
I would agree with that.
Okay. Do we need to formally vote that?
Not until we have an invoice.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a bill yet, but I would just tell you it's coming.
Okay. So is there anybody objecting to moving forward on this the way we've outlined it? Seeing no objection, hearing no objection, I think we're good.
Okay, very good.
Anything else on the Jack Cogswell solar?
No, we'll just keep moving forward. Thank you.
When will be the next touch point for this?
I'll get this in and I'll check in with Beth Greenblatt about getting the smart application. I can give you another update then
Okay.
in a couple weeks.
Okay. All right. Then if I may just speed up and shift over to one other, it's an informative topic. I think it's important because if it starts to formalize, the committee will be asked to manage it. But there has been a discussion and a level of work to look at solar in other parts of the town properties, particularly as it relates to schools. And one particular project that has been analyzed and put together. And I thought what I would do is just quickly just give you a synopsis and then turn it over to Hank and Michael Grice to maybe color it a little bit more, and then just open up to any questions. Again, this topic around the high school and potentially Newman parking lots with solar is more informative. Let me see if I can share my screen. And I ask if you guys will tell me whether you see it. And do you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go, if my mouse can help me. Okay. I'm gonna go to slide 9 here and 8. I apologize. I don't know why my Adobe is giving you some funny Greek characters or crazy characters. But if you look at the diagram, the high school, okay, you see the upper parking lots. You see these brown and yellow lines over the parking lot. That is the concept. So solar to generate power into there. And there's another rendition from the parking lots. You're looking at the front of the high school on the left-hand side, the upper parking lot, okay? And there's been some numbers crunched to make it look very favorable. There's also some consideration around the Newman parking lot, and that's what this one is showing, is the parking lot where some of the buses are parked overnight. But if you're driving into Newman, on the right-hand side is the main parking lot. So there's discussion around solar panels there as well. With that said, I would look to you, Hank, or Mike, maybe to color it a little bit more. But I think the idea here is that there's some real benefits and some numbers that are favorable as Michael's been driving his group and effort. So over to you guys. If you want me to move to a different slide or take this off, I can do it. You're on mute, Mike.
You're on mute.
Yeah, Michael, you're on mute. You want to try and unmute? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I did. I was going to let Hank open, and I'll fill in.
Okay, go ahead, Hank.
Do that, Hank. Up to you.
Yeah, I mean, going all the way back to when we had a solar energy exploratory committee to look at opportunities within the town, we focused at that time on the RTS, which after some analysis proved to be the most cost benefit, offer the greatest cost benefit to the town. And that single installation was greater than all of the other roofs from all the other school buildings within town combined. All of the other roofs, particularly those that were older, had issues about structure and age of the roof, which really made it inappropriate to explore putting rooftop solar in those locations. We did, however, identify way back then that there were opportunities for canopy style installations over this parking lot and the Newman parking lot. It's important to note that the high school is the largest single user of electricity within the town. The second largest user in the town is the Charles River pump station or treatment station. And the third is Newman. So and we may swing back with Rick Merson. to talk about the pump station or the treatment station, but this seemed to be an appropriate opportunity which would not impact the roof, would not have, could be handled during one summer of construction. And the initial look-see with Amoresco was to have it as a power purchase agreement so that the town would not have to front the money to do the construction, but would instead reap some of the benefits, and if it were possible, to build in battery backup storage, which is now becoming an added issue for the microgrid within the district. It would potentially supplement the capability of the high school to function as an emergency center during emergency conditions. The state and I think federal government are beginning to evolve in their directions for not only sustainability, but battery backup as an important part of spreading the opportunity. And in this case, we're probably looking at only serving about 25% of the total need of the high school with this type of an installation. So that's sort of an overview. Michael, I don't know if you want to, how you want to add to that?
Sure. You know, this, if you go back that same length of time, when I brought the idea of doing the RTS to the town, I started by bringing in an installer to present what it could look like. And that's, you know, then Hank took you through all the rest. And when you look at trying to put, or, you know, moving forward with the goals of the Commonwealth and the town and others to move to renewable energy, to reduce the spending we do on energy so we can put more money into the services we provide, you look first at ground mounted. That is the least expensive way to do solar, but you need land. The next would be buildings, and Hank took you through some of the challenges. I am certainly hoping that over time we'll move forward from a policy perspective, being much more aggressive about designing and including solar into projects as we build them. The third major place that you can put solar is on parking lots as canopies. It is more expensive than the others. However, all that said, it still can be done in a way that brings a net financial benefit to the town, as well as the benefits that, you know, Hank just indicated of being able to provide more renewable energy, being able to do things with respect to resilience and backup, and frankly, being an amenity to have cars protected from the rain and the snow, and actually can reduce runoff from asphalt. So there's a lot of reasons to do that. And that's why we brought this forward in conjunction with some students who are very interested to just put this forward as an idea of what we could do. And the idea that because we could look at parking lots without having to deal with issues of building ownership and potentially municipal bonds, it could potentially be done as a power purchase or a straight lease payment, in which case we don't have to deal with putting this into a capital plan because we do not put any money to it. So that was the motivation to do this. And I think what we wanted to do is just to put this forward. There's a lot of work going on with one group, Hank and others involved, looking at the technical parts. And I have another group of folks, user group, including the high school principal and others, to talk about how you socialize it, how you get people in the town and the schools and else interested in doing it. So there's work to be done. We're not, at a point of bringing this to you as a project, but we thought it'd be appropriate to put it in front of you. I know you've had some interest in some of this, to get any questions, comments, or feedback from you as something we would hope, and I would hope, speaking now with my school committee hat on, to be able to bring to you as a project from the school committee at some point.
Great. Open it up for questions or comments, Hank and Michael. Erwin?
Hi, Michael. Two questions. One is a little bit outside the scope of this committee, which you'll realize in a moment. My first question is it true that these also have the ability for electric vehicle charging stations? Is there enough capacity to provide charging stations for electric cars?
That could be included, and in fact, Eversource has a make-ready program for EV charging stations. You do not have to have a solar canopy, but if you are able to participate in that program, what you essentially do is ask Eversource to assess a parking lot. And if they conclude that it can be done, they actually pay the full costs of basically bringing in the power, and then the owner of the property, whether it's a commercial, municipal, multifamily residential, just has to put the charging stations and make whatever arrangements for charging them. That's something that when I talked to the folks at Eversource this spring before COVID hit, they said, well, we expect the money that we currently have to rent out, but we absolutely expect to ask for more because this is in their interest. We've been telling utilities to basically have people use less power for years. Well, with EV charging, we're telling them, go, please use more power. So they love this idea. So my anticipate is that something like this could be part of the conversation. Now you have to balance the fact that if you're looking at battery backup for resilience or other things, it all plays together. But yes, it is absolutely possible to include solar PV charging stations in something like this.
Okay, and then I have a selfish question. This is something I wanted to have looked at where I teach in Taunton. Can you give me a contact person that I can at least try to get the ball rolling?
Absolutely, I would be happy. In fact, the person that I've been working with, I'll just let you know, Judith Judson. She's actually she joined Amoresco in January. She was the previous commissioner of DOER. In fact, if you'll remember when we did the big festive opening for the landfill, she was commissioner and came. But I'll be happy to give her contact information. This actually is what she does. And, she'd be more than happy to assess something and talk to you or a user group, because that's, they basically want to get people interested in looking at it. They know they go through an RFP process, that's fine. But they're trying to get more people interested in doing this.
Yeah, if you can just give me that offline, I really appreciate it.
I will do that.
Great.
Thanks,
All set,
Mike.
Erwin?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I would add to that, Erwin, in the package that I sent out, you got all of the slides. I guess there were 16. And
Yeah.
Judith was mentioned up front,
Okay.
along with a couple of the people there. And she is very well placed. There's also a list of other installations that Amoresco has done
Saw that.
on cities and towns. And for anyone who is not familiar with a canopy installation, you can go to the town of Wayland, you can go to Lincoln Sudbury. There are numerous installations in the Northeast. And the advantage, if I can share my screen, is that it does give you the opportunity to cover the cars. And as long as they're high enough, which all of these installations are, then the snowplows can make it underneath unhampered. And you can also add lighting underneath so that it fulfills several different functions.
And in fact, since Rick is still, or was still with us, I think he may still be, I point out that the city of Newton actually installed a larger one along these lines, I think at their vehicle facility. So, and that's where they have much larger vehicles. So it's, this can be actually engineered for larger vehicles, not just automobiles, and still handle, all of the necessaries for the vehicles to operate for clearance.
Great. Richard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Michael. Appreciate your joining us this evening. I think there are a lot of reasons why this is a very, very laudable objective, but as a community member, I have two very, very serious concerns. You probably are going to know what I'm going to raise, but I'll raise them anyway. One is that certainly from an aesthetics point of view, I would worry about how that would look from Memorial Park, that structure. I'm not sure that it would be the best from an aesthetics point of view. But the other more serious concern I have is that when I first looked at this, I thought, oh my God, that's the end of the fireworks. I don't see how any way fireworks could be launched from that site with that structure in place. But again, I know there's no other place in town that I know of that can support the fireworks. And you and I are in the Exchange Club, so I'm sure you can appreciate my concern on that. And simply throw that out there as a cautionary note. As a community person, I think there'll be a lot of pushback on those 2 points. And I would also note too that there's one other.
When I first looked at this about 5 or 6 years ago, that was the first question I asked folks that I was working with, just in terms of, is there any risk or issue to them, since fireworks will be done there. The second would be obviously, how could you launch, or could you launch and have stuff there? And I don't know the answer to that. And yes, that would be a concern. Aesthetics are always a question. So it's something we would have to ask whether people would, what the trade-offs would be and how people would look at it.
Michael, on that point too, just so we go back to the Memorial Park reclamation project today. And I think that there was a vision when the fields were reconstructed that didn't quite match reality. And that is that certainly from Highland Avenue, the high school, beautiful grandeur of that of the 1930 buildings obscured by the hill that was artificially created. So I just simply throw those out there as very, very concerns that I think the community will raise. And so thank you.
George?
Yes, one question I have is, well, I think this project, I love the idea of having solar added. Most of you know I'm a real advocate of it. And I think the idea of putting it over parking lots is a great idea. I'm not so sure of the parking lots on the hill for the reasons that were previously mentioned by Richard. But the other question that I have is, I think this is beyond the scope of our responsibility as a committee. And we could support something like this, but this really, I don't think is our responsibility as a building committee, unless the town asked us to do this. And since the town really is not involved in paying for this at all, I can't see how we would be involved in getting it done. Somebody else would have to take on that responsibility, I think. Any thoughts about that, Chair?
I was under the impression that we'd be asked because it would be on the grounds and because of the cost. But I think it's a good question, George.
We really weren't involved in the solar project at the RTS.
Yeah.
That was done on a kind of ad hoc basis with the town making the decision to do it, and based on information that was provided by Hank, et cetera. So I guess that's a question that needs to be asked. Who's really responsible for it? Are the costs of installing this all included in the return to the town, or are we going to have to modify the electrical system in order to put that connection forward from the solar system into the building? Is all that cost going to be incurred by the contractor and subtracted from what we get out of it every month?
Hank?
Yes, if we compare it to the PPA that we have at the RTS, all of those costs would be covered by the developer. However, the town would have costs. The town would have to put together the RFP. The town would have to, advertise and go through the selection process. And I think those, and then we had special counsel costs associated with the review of contract, negotiation of contract, and then there's staff time. And I'd say all told on the RTS, I think there were 30, maybe 60,000 in outside costs, and plus the staff time. And it took a substantial amount of time over a year and a half, almost 2 years. So there is a grant that's available, but it's only
Never cover that.
No, the funds would be limited to about 12,500. And it's because we are a green community that we could access some of those funds. But
Those are typically peanuts.
yeah,
compared. And the costs of getting our electrical system at the high school ready to accept the solar input, that's all part of the developer's cost? Any modifications we have to make?
It's not clear to me yet whether it would backfeed our meter. Probably would not. It may be accounting wise tied to that meter, but Michael, maybe you know.
So just to kind of to take some of those questions, certainly the RTS project happening when it did is very different, is on a much larger scale, and today the projects like this are much more routine. They will still cost dollars. We don't know what the dollars would be. It's certainly possible, because other communities do it, to roll in all of the costs the town incurs into the project and then have it paid back out of the project. Whether we would want to do that or not is another question. With respect to your question about just the project, in terms of my assumption working here as we started this process is that a user agency would have to request this project, and I would look to the, to the schools would, as the host for that, working with the DPW, certainly because of the importance of managing parking lots, and obviously the select board in the town, because they'd have to be involved in this, would be the ones proposing the project. And then the question would be, as a construction project, which some cost would it fit, would the PPBC be asked to oversee it or not? And I, with you, George, and I can't answer that. I would assume that would be a logical thing, since we tend to want to do that as a community, because it served us well, but I don't know the answer to that question.
And this is a more general question, too, to finish off my questions. Some time ago, I spoke to a number of the select board members and asked for some leadership regarding what does it mean to be stating that you're a green community if you don't have any kind of a policy statement saying what you're in favor of doing. And it has affected us on a number of projects, including the project at the RTS. I mean, at Cogswell Building. I don't think the town has really thought through what it means to be a green community and what they'd like to support and what they wouldn't like to support. I mean, there's so many issues that are still out there, and nobody's taking the ball and running with it here. That's more of a general, I'm up on the pedestal pounding the ground saying, what's going on here, town? Do you agree with that, Michael?
I don't disagree with that, and that in fact is why projects like this end up being kind of levering up from multiple sides, working with the select board and others to push them to do this, to do more of this, to make the statements you do. And I think to some degree, I also look to this group, because to the extent that you have seen projects and work projects like this, the select board and others will look to you for advice and guidance. If I got them to say, should we put solar on every building? That's a great idea from a policy perspective, because community would want it. I know they would come to this group and say, well, is that possible? Is it practical? Does it make sense? So I think, unfortunately, you tend to have to work with a lot of different stakeholders to make it happen. But I agree with you. The select board has not stated out, a policy like I would love to see, but I continue to advocate for it. And I welcome others who do.
And we're still, we still have issues regarding Dave Davison says this is probably not going to be possible kind of things. And I give up at this point, wondering what the heck are we doing? Why haven't we addressed this issue? If there are legal issues, why haven't we started to address these issues? It just makes everything so much more complicated.
Yeah.
It does.
So if I may, you have a question, Erwin?
Just a comment about the question about the costs. I think, like everything else, if we're looking at solar, you fold that question into the payback. So if there's $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 in eventual town costs, what is the town going to save every year once this project is up and running? And maybe it pays for those costs in 1 or 2 years. If it takes 100 years, then you don't do it. So I think those kind of questions have to get folded into the discussion on what the payback is going to be.
Yeah, and I believe that, like Sunita Williams, if the town builds and owns the infrastructure, then clearly there can be direct backfeeding into the meter. Who knows if there'll be a Green New Deal just around the corner that will give greater incentives to cities and towns to act on these kinds of projects. But George, to your point, there are several other cities and towns like Lexington who have a very strong clean energy committee, and they've made commitments in Lincoln to only build net zero buildings in the future.
I think that's great. My point is, where are you, the town of Needham? Where are you? Where's your decision making? Where's your logic? Where's your vision? There's no vision for this. And until there's vision for it, you're going to get roadblocks thrown in your way every single time. And the only thing that's going to work is you'll be lucky to do Sunita Williams, because we're smart enough to say, we've got the money, why not do it? And nobody had the guts to stop us, frankly. And I think it shouldn't be done that way. The town of Needham, in my opinion, gets a failing grade on this issue of a green community. That's my opinion. And you could put that in the minutes. I get an F. I get an F for this.
Although
you probably agree with me.
I'm not, yeah, I'm no comment, but yes, I take your point. I will observe though that there was a lot of work done and had conversations, although it's every time it's a one-off. When we were doing Sunita Williams with the school committee and with the select board that I had, and with Hank, to basically get them to say, we really should do this. It is important and it's valuable. So, but right, we shouldn't have to do this every time, in my opinion as well, but
Just instinct.
I'll leave that there.
But
maybe what we need is the green, whatever it's called, at the high school to create a vision and present it to the town.
There you go.
But that is part of the conversation of one of the groups, with including students and others, about building the case for this. You're right. It doesn't build the case that we should do this all the time. Not going to disagree with that, but that's why we're looking at this one.
Just a comment, I'd be willing to push a little harder if I had the right information. Hank, do you have the information about these committees that exist in communities such as Wayland or Lexington? And I can contact them and find out how they do it. Who's on the committee? How do they function? And I can present that to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I don't want to go off the rail. I'm happy to talk. I would love to talk about this, George. I will say that in my experience with a lot of communities, it takes time, and it's not the committee per se. It's, do you have the commitment from leadership? Does the leadership of the town agree with this? They can then put a committee in place or not, but you've got to get them convinced that it's important. But yeah, I'm happy to talk with you about that offline. I don't want to take any more time here.
I appreciate that. So I'd like to wrap this piece up. Unless there's anything pressing on it. Again, this was supposed to be an informative session. It's not clear whether the PVC would be taking it, but there's an assumption that we may need to look at this. And I think it was important to look at it from that respect, to give feedback to these guys as they continue to work forward, and then also help support it, because we think it is. In many of our meetings, we've talked about the importance of solar and what it is. So appreciate the opportunity for you to come in, Michael, and Hank. Thanks for taking the time to do that. That wraps up the solar piece. We only have one more voting item, and I'm not sure if we have any additional business. So I'd like to turn our attention to the one voting item. It's for the Memorial Park. I think Mike is no longer online, and I don't know if we need much background But the invoice to put forth for approval is for LG Copley Associates for the acoustical consulting services for $1,800. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, George. Any questions? Hearing none, coming to vote, I'll go through the roll call, which is Richard,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Irwin. Did Irwin drop?
I said
Oh, there you
aye.
are. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I didn't hear it. Sorry. I'm looking down. And Stuart, chair, and Jean.
Aye.
So Stuart, the chair, aye. And I don't think we have any user groups for that. I think that's sufficient, Catherine, for the vote.
I think we're going to vote on Jack Cogswell pieces.
We
We
did
already
the
did
Jack
those.
Cogswell already.
Oh, sorry. Oh, right.
Yeah,
Oh,
when you were putting the thing up, I jumped right in and
thank-
said, let's
thank you.
take care of
You're
that.
correct. Thank you.
Is there any other topics from the committee? Okay. All right. As we have in the meeting minutes, it should reflect the action items from the public safety building. I think that was the only really important thing to recap at this point. Other than that, have a great week and stay tuned. We may need a couple of discussions prior to the next meeting, but right now that's not on the table. Next meeting's August 10th. Okay. Have a great week, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Hold on, good night.